The sun hung like a brass button in the cloudless sky, beating down mercilessly on Dry Creek. It was the kind of heat that made men mean and horses lazy, the kind that turned the red dust into a living thing that crawled into every corner of the ramshackle town. Marshal Jacob Jake Carver stood on the wooden boardwalk outside his office, watching the heat shimmer off the dirt street like water that would never come. Dry Creek wasn't much to look at in 1878. A collection of sun-bleached buildings huddled together against the vastness of the frontier, as if seeking protection from the wilderness that pressed in from all sides. The town had one main street, rutted and dusty, flanked by the necessary establishments of frontier life: Murphy's General Store, the Broken Wheel Saloon, Doc Henderson's office, which doubled as a barbershop on Tuesdays, and the marshal's office with its small jail attached. Jake adjusted his hat, feeling the weight of the silver badge on his vest. 5 years he'd worn it. 5 years of keeping what passed for peace in this forgotten corner of creation. At 32, he was already feeling older than his years, the job having carved lines into his face that the desert sun had baked permanent. His gray eyes, once bright with purpose, now held the weary look of a man who'd seen too much of human nature's darker side. "Hot enough to fry an egg on a rock," muttered Sam Chen, the town's blacksmith, as he passed by. Despite the prejudice he faced, Sam was respected for his skill with iron and his fair dealings. Jake nodded. "That it is, Sam, that it is." The routine of the morning was shattered by the arrival of the stage, 2 hours late and covered in enough dust to plant crops. The driver, old Pete Garrison, looked more haggard than usual as he climbed down from his perch. "Trouble on the road?" Jake asked, already knowing the answer. "Washout at Devil's Creek. Had to go the long way around." Pete spat tobacco juice into the street. "Got a passenger for you, Marshall, new arrival." Jake's interest was minimal until he saw her step down from the coach. She moved with a grace that seemed out of place in Dry Creek, like finding a rose blooming in the desert. Her dress, though travel-worn, spoke of better times and distant places. Dark hair pinned up revealed a neck that had known perfume instead of dust, and when she looked around, her green eyes held both wariness and determination. "Afternoon, ma'am." Jake touched his hat brim. "Welcome to Dry Creek." She studied him for a moment, taking in the badge, the Colt, .45 on his hip, the weathered face. "Thank you, Marshal. I'm looking for lodging. Might you direct me to a respectable establishment?" Her voice carried a slight southern lilt, musical against the harsh backdrop of the town. Jake found himself straightening his shoulders without meaning to. "Mrs. Hutchins runs a boarding house 2 blocks down. Clean rooms, fair prices." He paused. "Might I ask your name, ma'am, for the town records?" A shadow crossed her features, so quick he might have imagined it. Lillian Westford." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Jake had learned that everyone who came to Dry Creek was running from something. As long as they didn't bring their troubles with them, he was inclined to let sleeping dogs lie. "Well, Miss Westford, I hope you find what you're looking for here." Her smile was tired but genuine. "Just a fresh start, Marshal, nothing more." As Jake watched her walk toward the boarding house, her back straight despite the obvious fatigue, he felt something stir in his chest that he'd thought long dead. He pushed it down, irritated with himself. The last thing he needed was complications. The afternoon brought its usual share of minor disputes and drunken foolishness. Jake mediated an argument between 2 ranchers over water rights, locked up Tom Briggs for his monthly drunk and disorderly, and filled out the endless paperwork that even a frontier town required. As evening approached, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jake made his rounds. The town was settling into its nighttime rhythm, cowboys coming in from the ranges, the saloon piano starting its tinny melodies, the respectable folk closing their shutters against the coming revelry. He was passing the general store when he heard the commotion. Caught her red-handed, The voice belonged to Ephraim Murphy, the store owner, a pinch-faced man who counted his pennies like they were gold eagles. Trying to steal from me. A crowd was already gathering, drawn by the promise of drama. Jake pushed through to find Murphy gripping the arm of the woman who called herself Lillian Westford. Her face was flushed, but her chin was raised in defiance. "I wasn't stealing," she said, her voice steady despite the situation. "I was going to pay. I just needed—" "Lies." Murphy shook her arm. "I seen her put them goods in her bag without paying. Probably not the first time, neither." Jake stepped forward. "Let her go. Murphy, I'll handle this." "You better. Marshal, I want her arrested." Made an example of... Jake looked at the woman. Up close, he could see the signs he'd missed before. The careful mending on her dress, the worn shoes, the hollow in her cheeks that spoke of missed meals. Whatever money she'd had for her fresh start was clearly running thin. "What did she take?" he asked Murphy. "Bread, can of beans, some jerky." Murphy's face was red with indignation. "Don't matter if it was food or gold dust. Thieving is thieving." Before Jake could respond, another voice cut through the crowd. Well, what have we here?" Baron Deke Hollister pushed through the onlookers like a ship through water, his bulk and presence clearing a path, where Jake was lean and weathered. Hollister was thick with prosperity, his clothes expensive, his boots polished despite the dust. He owned the largest ranch in the valley, controlled most of the water rights, and had a finger in every profitable pie in the region. More importantly, he had the kind of power that made even honest men look the other way. "Seems we got ourselves a thief," Hollister said, his pale eyes running over Lillian in a way that made Jake's jaw clench. "Pretty one, too. Shame to see such beauty brought low by criminal tendencies." "It's a minor matter," Jake said. "I'll handle it according to the law." Hollister's smile was cold. "Oh, I'm sure you will. Marshal, but perhaps the lady needs to learn a harder lesson. Public humiliation might do her good. What do you say, boys? Should we teach this pretty thief what happens to those who steal in Dry Creek?" The crowd stirred, some eager, others uncomfortable. Jake recognized several of Hollister's men among them, cowboys who did more than herd cattle for their boss. "The law says," Jake began. "The law says thieves get punished," Hollister interrupted. "And sometimes the law needs help making sure justice is properly dramatic." He nodded to his men. "Boys, why don't you help the lady understand the consequences of her actions?" Two of Hollister's men stepped forward, grins on their faces. One of them, a brutal-looking man named Reb Thornton, reached for Lillian. "Stand down," Jake ordered, his hand moving to his gun. Thornton laughed. "Come on, Marshal. We're just going to have a little fun. Maybe march her through town with a sign around her neck. Thief in nice big letters. Maybe tear that pretty dress a little, so folks can see what kind of woman steals." Jake's Colt cleared leather before Thornton finished the sentence. "I said stand down. Anyone lays a hand on this woman answers to me." The crowd fell silent. Challenging Hollister's men was tantamount to challenging Hollister himself, and everyone knew it. Hollister's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Marshal. You're treading on dangerous ground." "I'm doing my job," Jake replied evenly, "which is upholding the law, the real law, not mob justice." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Hollister smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Marshal. We're all law-abiding citizens here." He tipped his hat mockingly to Lillian. "Ma'am, I'm sure the Marshal will see you get exactly what you deserve." He walked away, his men following reluctantly. The crowd began to disperse. The show over for now. Jake holstered his gun and turned to Murphy. "I'll pay for what she took." "But Marshal..." "I said I'll pay for it." Jake's tone brooked no argument. "Consider the matter closed." Murphy grumbled but nodded, knowing better than to push further. Jake looked at Lillian. "Come with me." He led her to his office, aware of the eyes following them. Once inside, he closed the door and leaned against it. "Sit down," he said, indicating a chair. She remained standing. "I can explain. Your name isn't Lillian Westford." She met his gaze steadily. "No. You're running from something." "Yes. And you're broke." Her chin lifted slightly, temporarily without funds. Despite this situation, Jake felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. "That why you took the food?" For the first time, her composure cracked. "I was hungry," she said simply. "I haven't eaten in 2 days. I thought I had enough money to last until I could find work. But the stage fare was more than expected, and the boarding house wanted a week in advance." Jake moved to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. He poured whiskey into both and handed her one. "Drink," he ordered. "You look like you need it." She took a sip, coughed slightly, then took another. Some color returned to her cheeks. "What's your real name?" Jake asked, settling into his chair. She hesitated, then, Rose McBride." "And what are you running from?" "Rose McBride." "Does it matter?" "It might." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her whiskey. I danced in a saloon in Kansas City, among other things." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "The owner decided he wanted more than dancing. When I refused, he made it clear that my refusal wasn't acceptable. So I left." "He hurt you." Her laugh was bitter. "Charles Donovan doesn't dirty his own hands. He has people for that." Jake knew the name. Donovan ran several establishments in Kansas City, the kind that operated on the edge of respectability, the kind where young women often found themselves trapped. "So you came here?" "I came west. Here just happened to be where my money ran out." She met his eyes. "I'm not a thief, Marshall. I've done things I'm not proud of to survive. But I've never stolen before today." Jake believed her. He'd been reading people long enough to know truth when he heard it. "Hollister's going to be a problem," he said. "He doesn't like being challenged, and he's got a long memory. I can leave town tomorrow." "With what money?" Jake shook his head. "Besides, running won't solve anything. You'll just be hungry in the next town." "Then what do you suggest?" "Marshall," Jake made a decision that would change both their lives, though he didn't know it yet. "You'll stay here tonight, in the jail." Her eyes widened. "You're arresting me." "I'm protecting you. Hollister's men might decide to continue their lesson if they find you at the boarding house. The jail's the safest place in town." He stood. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out something more permanent." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" Jake looked at her for a long moment, seeing not just the beautiful woman, but the survivor underneath. The steel spine that kept her standing when everything else tried to beat her down. "Maybe because I'm tired of watching Hollister and men like him crush anyone who can't fight back," he said finally. "Or maybe because I remember when the law was supposed to protect people, not just property." Rose stood, swaying slightly from exhaustion and whiskey. "Thank you, Marshall Carver." "Jake," he said, "just Jake." She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Thank you, Jake." As he led her to the cells in the back, Jake wondered what he'd just set in motion. Hollister wouldn't forget this challenge to his authority. There would be consequences. But looking at Rose McBride, her head held high despite everything, Jake found he didn't care, for the first time in years. He'd done something that felt right, not just legal. Outside, the sun had set, and Dry Creek was settling into darkness. But in the marshal's office, a different kind of light had been kindled, one that would burn through the night and into the uncertain days to come. The morning came too soon, bringing with it the consequences Jake had expected. He'd spent the night in his office, dozing fitfully in his chair, one ear tuned to any trouble that might come calling. Rose had slept in the cell, the door unlocked, a clean blanket on the cot, more guest than prisoner. He was making coffee on the small stove when she emerged, her hair loose around her shoulders, looking younger and more vulnerable than she had the day before. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm tin. "There's something oddly comforting about iron bars when they're keeping danger out instead of keeping you in." Jake was about to respond when the door burst open. Murphy stood there, red-faced and agitated. "Marshal, you better come quick. There's trouble at the boarding house." Jake set down his coffee, already knowing this was connected to yesterday. "What kind of trouble?"
"Mrs. Hutchins says someone broke into the room that woman was supposed to rent, tore it up good, left a message."
Jake glanced at Rose, saw her face pale. "Stay here," he told her, then followed Murphy out. The boarding house was in chaos. Mrs. Hutchins, a sturdy widow who'd survived Indian raids and cholera outbreaks, looked shaken. The room in question was destroyed, mattress slashed, furniture overturned, and painted on the wall in red, "Thieves and whores get what they deserve." "Happened sometime in the night," Mrs. Hutchins said. "Didn't hear a thing. They must have come in through the window." Jake examined the scene, though he didn't need to look for clues. This had Hollister's stench all over it, even if proving it would be impossible. The message was clear: Rose wasn't welcome in Dry Creek. "I'll file a report," Jake said, "and I'll pay for the damages." Mrs. Hutchins shook her head. "It's not about the money. Marshal, I can't have that woman here. Not if this is what comes with her. I've got other boarders to think about." Jake couldn't blame her. Fear was a powerful motivator, and Hollister knew how to use it. Back at his office, he found Rose cleaning, having already washed the coffee cups and swept the floor. She looked up when he entered, read his expression. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He told her about the room, the message. Hollister's making his position clear. She set down the broom, sank into a chair. "I should leave." "And go where you've got no money, no food, and Hollister's reach extends beyond Dry Creek." Jake paced the small office. "No, running's not the answer." "Then what is—" Before he could answer, the door opened again. This time it was Judge Theodore Blackwood, the circuit judge who happened to be in town for his monthly session, a thin man with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles. Blackwood was one of the few men in the territory Hollister couldn't buy or intimidate. "Marshal." The judge nodded, then looked at Rose with interest. "And you must be the young woman causing such a stir, Miss Westford, isn't it?" "McBride," Rose corrected. "Rose McBride." "Ah, honesty. Refreshing." Blackwood settled his angular frame into a chair. "I heard about yesterday's incident, also heard about this morning's vandalism. Seems we have a situation developing." "Nothing I can't handle, Judge," Jake said. "I'm sure. However, Baron Hollister has filed a formal complaint. Says you exceeded your authority, threatened his men while they were trying to assist in a lawful citizen's arrest." Jake snorted. "That's bull and you know it." "What I know and what I can prove in court are different things." "Marshal," Blackwood removed his spectacles, cleaned them thoughtfully. "Hollister's also suggesting that you have a personal interest in Miss McBride that's affecting your judgment." Heat rose in Jake's face. "That's a lie?" "Is it?" Blackwood's gaze was penetrating. "You paid for her theft out of your own pocket. You housed her in the jail. You're protecting her. One might say you're going above and beyond your duty." Rose stood abruptly. "This is my fault. I'll leave town today." "Sit down, young woman," Blackwood said mildly. "Nobody's going anywhere just yet." He replaced his spectacles. "Marshal, I'm not here as Hollister's messenger boy, but I am here to remind you that the law must be seen as impartial. If you appear to be playing favorites, I'm protecting a citizen from mob violence. Jake said firmly, "That's my job." "Indeed, and I commend you for it. However, we need a more permanent solution. Miss McBride cannot live in your jail indefinitely." "I can work," Rose interjected. "I just need a chance. I can cook, clean, sew." "Can you read and write?" Blackwood asked. "Yes, sir. I had schooling before." She trailed off. "Before circumstances changed." Blackwood nodded. "As it happens, I may have a solution. My clerk, Timothy Morrison, broke his leg last week, fell off his horse. The fool. I need someone to help with court documents for the next few sessions. The pay isn't much, but it includes room and board at the Riverside Inn while court is in session." Jake felt a mixture of relief and something else disappointment. "That's generous, Judge." "It's practical. I need help. Miss McBride needs work, and it removes her from your immediate responsibility, thus defusing Hollister's complaint." Blackwood stood. "Miss McBride, can you start tomorrow?" "Yes," Rose said quickly. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Judge Blackwood." "Don't thank me yet. I am a demanding employer." But his eyes were kind. "Marshal, a word outside." Jake followed the judge onto the boardwalk. Blackwood lit a pipe, took a few contemplative puffs. "You know this isn't over," the judge said. "Hollister won't like being thwarted." "I know." "That young woman, there's more to her story." "Most likely." "You're taken with her." Jake started to protest, but Blackwood held up a hand. "I'm not blind, Marshal, nor am I judging, but be careful. Hollister's looking for any excuse to remove you, and a scandal would serve his purposes nicely. I'm just doing my job. See that it stays that way." Blackwood knocked his pipe against the railing. "She's running from something, that one. Make sure it doesn't follow her here." After the judge left, Jake found Rose standing by the window, watching the street. The morning light caught her profile, and he was struck again by the odd mixture of strength and vulnerability she carried. "Thank you," she said without turning, "for everything. Just doing your job? I know." She faced him then, a wry smile on her lips. "You say that a lot." "Because it's true." "Is it?" She moved closer, and he caught her scent, soap and something floral, feminine despite the harsh surroundings. "Was it your job to stand up to those men yesterday to pay for my food to give me a safe place to sleep?" Jake found his mouth dry. "The law protects everyone equally." "In my experience, Marshal, the law protects whoever pays it best." Her green eyes held his. "You're different." "I'm just a man trying to do right." "That's what makes you different." The space between them seemed to shrink without either moving. Jake could see the pulse at her throat, the way her breath quickened. His hand started to rise, to touch her cheek, to... The door slammed open. Reb Thornton stood there, grinning unpleasantly. "Marshal, Miss..." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Boss wants to see you. Carver, both of you." "Hollister doesn't give me orders," Jake said, hand drifting to his gun. "Ain't an order. Call it an invitation. He's at the Cattlemen's Club. Says he wants to discuss a peaceful resolution to this misunderstanding." Jake knew it was a trap of some kind, but refusing would only escalate things. "Fine. Tell him we'll be there within the hour." Thornton's grin widened. "He said to come now." "And I said within the hour." Jake's voice carried steel. "Unless Hollister's crowned himself king while I wasn't looking. I'll come when I'm ready." Thornton's face darkened, but he left without another word. Rose touched Jake's arm. "You don't have to do this. I can face him alone." "Like hell." Jake checked his Colt, made sure he had extra ammunition. "We go together, or not at all. It could be dangerous." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Most things worth doing are..." The Cattlemen's Club was Hollister's domain, a 2-story building that served as headquarters for the valley's wealthy ranchers. Jake had been inside exactly once before, and the memory wasn't pleasant. The place reeked of cigar smoke and privilege, leather and bourbon, and the particular arrogance of men who'd never been told no. Hollister waited in the main room, sprawled in a leather chair like a king on his throne. Several of his men lounged nearby, trying to look casual but positioned strategically. Jake noted exits, angles, potential cover, old habits from his days riding with the Rangers. Marshal Carver, Miss McBride. Hollister didn't rise. So good of you to accept my invitation.
Say your piece, Hollister,
Jake said. We've got better things to do than dance around. Direct, I appreciate that in a man. Hollister gestured to chairs. Please, sit. No need for this to be unpleasant. Jake remained standing. Rose followed his lead. Very well. Hollister sighed theatrically. Let me be equally direct. The woman is a problem. She's a thief, probably worse. And her presence here disturbs the peace. I'm prepared to be generous. $500 to leave town immediately. More than enough to start fresh somewhere else.
I'm not for sale, Rose said quietly.
Hollister's eyes flicked to her, cold and dismissive.
Everything's for sale, my dear. It's just a matter of price.
The lady said no. Jake interjected.
I wasn't aware the lady needed you to speak for her, Marshal.
Hollister's tone sharpened. Unless the good judge was right about your personal interest. My interest is in keeping the peace and upholding the law. Your interest seems very focused on one particular citizen. Hollister stood then, moving to the window that overlooked the main street. Do you know what built this town? Martial cattle, money. Men like me who had the vision and the will to carve civilization out of wilderness. Not drifters and dance hall girls and worn-out lawmen clinging to outdated notions of justice.
Everyone has a right to—
Rights, Hollister laughed.
Rights are what men like me allow men like you to pretend exist.
But let me be clear. He turned, and the mask of civility dropped entirely. That woman leaves town, one way or another. She can take my money and go comfortable, or what? Jake's hand hovered near his gun. Or things become uncomfortable. For her, for you, for anyone who helps her. Hollister smiled thinly. I own half this town. Marshal, the bank holds mortgages I control. The stores buy goods from my suppliers. Even your salary comes partly from taxes on my land. How long do you think you can stand against that?
As long as it takes.
Noble. Stupid. But noble. Hollister returned to his chair. Tell me, Marshal, what do you really know about Miss McBride? Did she mention Charles Donovan? Jake felt Rose tense beside him. I thought so. Hollister's smile widened. Donovan's a business associate of mine. He told me all about his runaway songbird. Told me things that would make even a frontier town blush. Would you like to hear them? Marshal, would you like to know exactly what kind of woman you're protecting? I know enough. Jake said, Do you? Do you know about the senator's son in St. Louis? The banker in Kansas City? The trail of broken men and empty wallets she's left behind? Lies, Rose whispered. But Jake heard the tremor in her voice. Truth, Hollister countered. Or close enough to it for our purposes. How do you think the good people of Dry Creek will react when they learn their marshal is harboring a notorious, shall we say, adventurous? Jake had heard enough. We're done here. Yes, Hollister agreed. I believe we are. You have until tomorrow night to reconsider. After that, he shrugged. Well, frontier towns can be dangerous places. Accidents happen. People disappear. It was a naked threat, and everyone in the room knew it. Jake's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice level. If anything happens to Miss McBride, I'll hold you responsible. Prove it, Hollister said simply.
Now get out of my club.
Outside, Rose was shaking. Jake guided her to a quiet spot between buildings, away from curious eyes.
How much of what he said was true?
He asked gently. She looked up at him, tears threatening. Does it matter? Not to me, but I need to know what we're dealing with. She took a shuddering breath. There was a senator's son. In St. Louis, he said he loved me. Said he'd marry me. I was young. Foolish. I believed him. When his father found out, they paid me to leave and keep quiet about the baby. Baby? I lost it. The doctors said it was the stress, the travel. But I think it was God's way of saying I didn't deserve. She broke off, turned away. Jake pulled her against him without thinking, felt her resist for a moment before sagging into his chest. That's not how God works, he said quietly. How would you know? Because he brought you here. The words surprised him, but he knew they were true. Whatever you did before, whoever you were, that's done. You're Rose McBride now, and you've got the right to start over. She pulled back to look at him. Even if it costs you everything. My badge isn't everything. Isn't it? He thought about it, really thought about it. For 5 years, the badge had been his identity, his purpose. But standing here, holding this complicated, damaged, beautiful woman, he realized something had shifted. The badge was just metal. The job was just a job. But this feeling of rightness, of purpose beyond law books and regulations, this was real. No, he said finally. It's not. Something passed between them then, electric and dangerous. Rose reached up, touched his face with fingers that trembled slightly. You're a good man, Jake Carver. I'm trying to be. Don't. Her thumb traced his jaw. Don't try, just be. He might have kissed her then, might have crossed that line, but the church bell rang, calling people to noon services, breaking the spell. They stepped apart, both breathing a little too fast. We should go, Rose said. Judge Blackwood will wonder where I am. But as they walked back toward the main street, Jake noticed the looks they got, the whispers that followed their passage. Hollister's poison was already spreading. By evening, half the town would believe whatever lies he chose to tell. And tomorrow night, Hollister's deadline would expire. Jake touched the badge on his chest, feeling its weight differently now. He'd sworn an oath to protect and serve, but sometimes he was learning. Protecting someone meant more than just following the law. Sometimes it meant choosing between the badge and the person, and looking at Rose McBride, her chin up despite the stares and whispers. Jake knew which choice he'd make. The question was whether they'd survive the consequences. The Riverside Inn stood at the better end of town, a 2-story establishment that catered to traveling businessmen and the occasional dignitary. Rose had been working there for 3 days now, helping Judge Blackwood with his court documents, and Jake had made a point of checking on her each evening. It was during these visits that they'd begun to truly know each other, sharing conversations that ran deeper than their circumstances. Tonight, Jake found her in the small office the judge had commandeered, surrounded by legal papers and ledgers. The lamplight caught the auburn highlights in her hair as she bent over her work, pen moving in careful strokes. You should eat something, he said, setting down a covered plate from the hotel dining room. She looked up, smiled that smile that made his chest tight. You're always trying to feed me. Someone has to. He pulled up a chair, watched as she set aside her work and uncovered the plate. How's the judge treating you? Like a slave driver, she said, but her tone was fond. He's brilliant, though the way he sees through to the heart of matters, cuts away all the nonsense. I'm learning more than I expected. Good. That's good. Jake fidgeted with his hat. They both knew Hollister's deadline was tomorrow night, but neither had mentioned it. The unspoken threat hung between them like smoke. Rose set down her fork.
Stop looking at me like that.
Like what? Like I'm going to disappear. She reached across the small space, took his hand. I'm not running anymore. Jake, whatever happens tomorrow. Nothing's going to happen. I won't let it. Her fingers tightened on his.
You can't protect everyone. You can't fix everything with that badge and gun.
I can try.
Oh, Jake.
Her voice was soft, sad. My brave, stubborn lawman. What am I going to do with you? The question hung in the air, loaded with possibilities. Jake turned her hand over in his, studied the calluses from work, the faint scars of a hard life. Such small hands to have caused so much upheaval in his ordered existence. Rose, he began, then stopped. What could he say? That in less than a week she'd upended everything he thought he knew about himself. That when he looked at her, he saw not the dance hall girl or the woman with a past, but something bright and precious worth protecting.
I know, she whispered. I know.
The door burst open. Judge Blackwood stood there, face grim. Marshal, Miss McBride, we have a problem. Jake was on his feet instantly. What kind of problem? The kind that's gathered outside with torches and liquor courage. Blackwood moved to the window, peered through the curtain. Seems Hollister's been busy spreading his poison. There's talk of running Miss McBride out of town. Jake looked out. A crowd had indeed gathered in the street. Maybe 20 men, mostly ranch hands and drifters. He spotted several of Hollister's crew among them, including Reb Thornton, who seemed to be doing most of the talking. Stay here, Jake ordered, checking his weapon. Both of you. Jake, Rose started. I mean it. Judge, keep her inside. He went out the front door, letting it close firmly behind him. The crowd turned at his appearance, faces ugly with mob courage and whiskey. Evening, boys, Jake said calmly. Bit late for a social gathering, isn't it? We got business with the woman. Thornton called out, Town business. Only business you've got is finding your beds before I arrest the lot of you for disturbing the peace. Someone in the back laughed. 1 man against 20? Those ain't good odds, Marshal. Depends on the 1 man. Jake's hand rested on his gun butt, casual but ready. And depends on whether those 20 want to be known as the cowards who mobbed a woman. She's a thief and worse, another voice, slurred with drink. We don't want her kind here. Her kind. Jake's voice went hard. And what kind is that? The kind that works honest for Judge Blackwood, the kind that pays for her room and board, or just the kind that Baron Hollister doesn't like? That caused a stir. Mentioning Hollister's name openly connected him to this mob, something the Baron probably hadn't wanted. Thornton pushed forward. Now see here. Carver. No, you see, Jake drew then, smooth and fast, the Colt appearing in his hand like magic. First man who takes another step toward this building goes down. Second man, too. After that, gets a bit uncertain, but I figure I can take at least 6 of you before you get me. Question is, which 6 want to die tonight? The crowd wavered. Facing down an armed marshal in broad daylight was one thing. Facing him in the dark, when he had cover and they were in the open, was another calculation entirely. You're making a mistake, Carver, Thornton said. This woman ain't worth your career. Hell, she ain't worth your life. That's for me to decide. A new voice cut through the standoff. What's all this, then? Sam Chen, the blacksmith, emerged from the shadows, carrying his massive hammer like it weighed nothing. Behind him came Doc Henderson, and, surprisingly, old Pete Garrison from the stage line. All 3 men were armed. Just out for an evening stroll, Sam said conversationally, but his dark eyes were fixed on the mob. Heard there might be trouble. Thought we'd see if the marshal needed help keeping the peace. This ain't your business, Chinaman, someone snarled. Sam's smile was cold. Everything in this town is my business. Friend, I shoe your horses, fix your wagons, Be a shame if I got too busy to help certain folks. More figures emerged from the darkness. Mrs. Hutchins, carrying her deceased husband's shotgun. Murphy, looking uncomfortable but present. Even the pastor, Bible in one hand, pistol in the other. Seems the marshals got more friends than you figured, Doc Henderson observed. Now, I've got patients to tend tomorrow, and I'd rather not have them be any of you boys. So what say we all head home? The mob was dissolving. Outnumbered now and facing citizens they knew, people they'd have to face in daylight. One by one, they began to drift away, muttering. Thornton was the last to go.
This ain't over, Carver. The boss don't like being crossed.
Tell Hollister he knows where to find me if he wants to discuss it personal-like. After they were gone, Jake turned to his unexpected allies. I'm obliged to you all.
You stood up for what was right,
Sam said simply. About time someone did. That woman brings trouble, Murphy said, but without real heat. Still, mob justice ain't the answer. They dispersed, leaving Jake standing in the street. When he turned back to the inn, Rose was in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. You stupid, wonderful fool, she said. He climbed the steps to her. I told you to stay inside.
When have I ever done what I'm told?
She touched his face. They could have killed you, but they didn't. This time, she pulled him inside. Into the small office. Judge Blackwood had discreetly disappeared. Jake, this can't go on. People are choosing sides because of me. The town's tearing apart.
The town's been torn for a while. You just brought it to the surface.
She paced to the window, arms wrapped around herself. I should take Hollister's money. Leave before...
No.
Jake caught her shoulders, turned her to face him.
That's not happening. Why?
The word was almost a cry. Why do you care so much you barely know me?
I know enough.
Do you know I've been with men for money? Do you know I've lied and cheated and done whatever I had to do to survive? Do you know? He kissed her. It wasn't gentle or careful, but desperate, needful, trying to show her with actions what words couldn't convey. She resisted for a heartbeat, then melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I know you're brave, he said quietly. I know you're trying to be better than your past. I know when you smile, really smile, it's like sunrise. I know you hum when you're concentrating on your work. I know you're kind to people who don't deserve it. I know I've been dead inside for years until you woke me up. Is that enough? She was crying again, but softly now. Jake, I'm not asking for forever, he said. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But don't run, please, not now. She kissed him this time, sweet and sad and full of promise. All right, she whispered against his lips. All right. They held each other in the lamplight, two damaged souls finding comfort in shared warmth. Outside, the town settled into uneasy sleep, but they both knew this was just the calm before the storm. Tomorrow was Hollister's deadline. The next day passed in tense anticipation. Jake made his rounds, hyper-aware of every movement, every shadow. The town felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Even the weather seemed to sense it. Clouds building on the horizon, the air thick and still. He found himself at the cemetery as evening approached, standing before a weathered headstone. Sarah Carver, beloved wife, 1,850 to 1,873 inches. I've been a ghost since you died, he said quietly. Just going through the motions, wearing this badge like armor against feeling anything. Then she came along and he touched the stone. I think you'd like her. She's got your spirit, your way of seeing the good in people. I know I promised I'd never love anyone else. But Sarah, I think you'd want me to live again. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Jake checked his pocket watch. An hour until sundown, until Hollister's deadline. He found Rose at the inn, Bag packed. Going somewhere? He asked, though his heart already knew. I won't be the reason you die. Her chin was up, but her eyes were red. I'm taking the evening stage.
The hell you are.
Jake. We had a deal. No running.
That was before I realized.
She stopped, took a breath. Before I realized I love you too much to watch you throw your life away for me. The words hit him like a physical blow. Love, she loved him. Rose.
Don't.
She held up a hand.
Don't say it back. Don't make this harder.
He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulled her against him. I love you, he said fiercely. You hear me? I love you, and you're not getting on that stage. She sobbed once, then pushed away.
You impossible man. Don't you understand Hollister will kill you?
Maybe, maybe not, but I'd rather die standing for something than live as a coward.
That's not fair.
None of this is fair. He cupped her face in his hands.
But it's what we've got.
Stay, fight with me, build something with me, please. She searched his eyes for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, God help us both, but all right. He kissed her, sealing the promise, then stepped back. I need to go. Sunset's coming.
Jake.
She caught his sleeve.
Whatever happens, these past days, they've been worth everything.
He squeezed her hand, then headed for the door. He had a date with Destiny and Baron Hollister, and only one of them would walk away whole. But for the first time in 5 years, Jake Carver felt truly alive. Win or lose, live or die. He was finally fighting for something that mattered more than law or duty. He was fighting for love. And that, he thought as he stepped into the gathering dusk, made all the difference. The storm broke just after sunset, turning the streets of Dry Creek into rivers of mud. Jake stood under the overhang of his office, watching lightning illuminate the empty Main Street. Most folks had taken shelter, sensing that tonight's storm was more than just weather. You shouldn't have sent her away, he said to the darkness. Judge Blackwood stepped out of the shadows, water dripping from his hat. Miss McBride is safe at my quarters with 2 deputies standing guard. This is between you and Hollister now.
It always was.
Perhaps, but that woman made it personal. The judge lit his pipe, shielding it from the rain. You know he's coming. I know. With men. I figured as much. Blackwood studied him. You could still leave. Take her and go. No one would blame you. Jake touched his badge. I would. Pride. Marshal. Duty. Jake smiled thinly. And maybe a little pride. Man spends 5 years behind a badge. He likes to think it meant something. Thunder crashed overhead. And in its wake came the sound of horses, multiple horses, moving slow through the storm. Jake checked his Colt one more time. Get inside. Judge! I think not. Blackwood drew a long-barreled pistol from his coat. I may be old, but I'm still a fair hand with a gun. Besides, I'm curious to see how this plays out. They emerged from the storm like phantoms, 6 riders, water streaming off their slickers. Hollister rode in the center, flanked by Thornton and 4 other hard cases. They reined up 20 feet from the marshal's office. Evening, Marshal, Hollister called out, having to shout over the storm. Filthy night for business, but then you forced my hand. State your business and move on. Jake replied, You know why I'm here. The woman, she leaves tonight, or things get unpleasant. Miss McBride is under the protection of the law. Hollister laughed. The law, You still hiding behind that tin star? Carver, very well. Reb, show the marshal what we think of his law. Thornton dismounted, walked forward until he was 10 feet from Jake, with deliberate movements. He drew a folded paper from his coat. That there's a warrant, he said, signed by Judge Cornelius in Silver City, for the arrest of one Rose McBride, also known as Lillian Westford, also known as Scarlet Divine, wanted for theft, fraud, and moral turpitude in Kansas City. Jake's heart sank, but he kept his face neutral.
Let me see it.
Thornton tossed the paper. It landed in the mud at Jake's feet. As he bent to retrieve it, he heard the distinctive click of hammers being cocked. The other riders had drawn their weapons.
Careful, Marshal,
Hollister warned.
No sudden moves.
Jake slowly picked up the warrant, unfolded it. Even in the poor light, he could see it looked official. The seal, the signature, all of it. This could be forged, he said. Could be, Hollister agreed. But it's not. Cost me a pretty penny to track down her real history. But Charles Donovan was very helpful. Seems Miss McBride left quite an impression in Kansas City. Several prominent citizens are eager to see her return to face justice. This warrant's 2 years old. Justice has no expiration date. Marshal, you know that. Hollister leaned forward in his saddle. So, what's it going to be? You going to uphold the law you claim to serve, or you going to let your feelings for that woman cloud your judgment? Jake stood in the rain, warrant in hand, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything he'd built his life on, law, order, justice, stood on one side. On the other stood Rose, with her complicated past and her bright future. Well, Thornton prompted, hand hovering near his gun. The warrant's legitimate. Judge Blackwood said quietly beside him, if it's real, you have to honor it. Jake looked at the paper again, then very deliberately tore it in half, then quarters, then let the pieces fall into the mud. Oops, he said. The silence that followed was deafening, even with the storm raging around them.
You just signed your death warrant.
Carver, Hollister said, his voice deadly quiet.
Maybe, but at least I'll die a man, not a dog doing tricks for you.
Noble words. Let's see how noble you are with lead in your belly.
Boys.
The mounted men raised their weapons. Jake pushed Blackwood toward the door, hand going for his gun, knowing he was too late, too outnumbered. A rifle shot cracked through the storm. One of Hollister's men cried out, clutched his shoulder, gun falling from nerveless fingers. That's enough. Sam Chen stepped into view, rifle aimed. Behind him, Doc Henderson and Pete Garrison emerged from cover, then more. Murphy, Mrs., Hutchins, even the pastor. Half the town, it seemed, armed and ready.
This stops now,
Sam said. We've had enough of your bullying.
Hollister,
you dare, Hollister started. We dare. Mrs., Hutchins interrupted, her shotgun trained on the Baron.
This is our town too. You don't own us.
I own the bank that holds your mortgages. And we own the guns pointing at you. Doc Henderson observed. Seems like what they call a Mexican standoff. Hollister's face was purple with rage.
You think this changes anything? I'll have you all?
Another voice cut through his tirade.
You'll do nothing.
Rose walked down the middle of the street, head high despite the rain plastering her hair to her face. She'd changed into a traveling dress, carried a small bag. Rose, no. Jake started forward, but she held up a hand. It's all right, she said. This is my fight. She looked up at Hollister. You want me gone, fine. I'll go, tonight, on one condition. You're hardly in a position to make demands. Hollister sneered. I disagree. Rose reached into her bag, pulled out a leather-bound journal. Before I left Kansas City, I had the foresight to copy certain documents from Charles Donovan's private files, documents that detail his business arrangements, including his partnership with a certain cattle baron who's been using his ranches to move stolen horses across state lines. Even in the dim light, Jake could see Hollister pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Rose opened the journal, began reading. March 15th, 1876. Received shipment of 20 head from D.H. Ranch branding altered as agreed. Payment of. Enough, Hollister's voice cracked.
What do you want?
I want your word, your public word, in front of all these witnesses, that you'll leave Marshall Carver alone. No retribution, no schemes, nothing. He keeps his job, his reputation, everything. And in return, I disappear. Tonight. Forever. Rose's voice was steady, but Jake saw her hands tremble. You get what you wanted, me gone, but Jake stays whole. Rose, no, Jake said. We can fight this, together. She turned to him, and her smile broke his heart. We could, but how many people would get hurt? How much blood would spill for what? So a dance hall girl with a past can pretend she deserves a future. You do deserve.
Please,
her voice cracked.
Let me do this one good thing. Let me protect you the way you protected me.
Jake felt something die in his chest. The rain seemed colder suddenly, the night darker. You have my word, Hollister said quickly. The marshal stays untouched. Now give me that journal. No. Rose tucked it back in her bag.
This goes with me. Insurance.
Break your word. And copies go to the territorial governor, the army, and every newspaper from here to Chicago. Hollister's jaw worked, but he nodded. Get out of my sight. Rose walked to Jake, reached up to touch his face.
Remember me,
she whispered. Rose. She pressed her fingers to his lips. No words. We said everything that mattered. Then she was walking away, toward the stage depot. Jake started to follow, but strong hands held him back. Sam and Doc Henderson.
Let her go, son, Doc said gently. She's saving your life.
Jake watched her disappear into the storm, taking his heart with her. The crowd began to disperse, Hollister and his men riding off without another word, the townspeople melting back into their homes. Soon it was just Jake and Judge Blackwood, standing in the rain. She's a remarkable woman. The judge said, she was Jake. But Jake was already walking away, into his office, closing the door on the world. He sat at his desk, stared at the badge on his chest. 5 years he'd worn it with pride. Now it felt like a millstone, drowning him in duty and honor and all the things that had cost him the only woman he'd ever loved besides Sarah. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, and the rain fell harder, as if the sky itself was weeping. He'd won. He'd kept his badge, his position, his life. So why did it feel like he'd lost everything that mattered? The bottle of whiskey in his drawer had never looked so inviting. Jake poured 3 fingers, stared at the amber liquid. Somewhere out there, Rose was on a stage, riding away from him forever. He'd probably never know where she went, who she became, whether she found the fresh start she deserved. Damn you, he said to the badge. Damn you to hell. But the badge just gleamed in the lamplight, silent and accusing, a silver reminder of the price of honor in a dishonest world. The storm raged on, and Jake Carver sat alone in his office, badge on his chest and emptiness in his heart, learning the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes winning felt exactly like losing, and sometimes love demanded sacrifices that no amount of courage could prevent. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream. Jake went through the motions of his duties, breaking up fights, filing reports, making his rounds, but it was like watching someone else live his life. The town had settled back into its routine, with Hollister keeping his word, at least publicly, but Jake felt like a ghost haunting his own existence. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Jake was in Murphy's store when Mrs. Hutchins rushed in, face flushed with excitement. Marshal, there's been a shooting at the Riverside Inn. Jake's blood ran cold. He was out the door before she finished speaking, boots pounding through the mud. A crowd had already gathered outside the inn. He pushed through to find Hollister's man, Reb Thornton, lying on the boardwalk, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. What happened? Jake demanded. Judge Blackwood emerged from the inn, face grim. Thornton here decided to help himself to the cash box while I was in court. My new clerk disagreed with his plan.
New clerk?
Ah, yes. I hired a replacement for Miss McBride last week. Quite handy with a derringer. As it turns out, the judge's eyes twinkled. Perhaps you should come inside and take her statement. Jake's heart hammered as he entered the inn. There, in the small office where he'd last held Rose, stood a woman in a simple gray dress, her back to him. Her hair was different. Shorter, darker, but something about the way she held herself. She turned, and Jake's world tilted. It was Rose, but not Rose. This woman's face was plainer, her eyes brown instead of green, her features altered in subtle ways that changed everything. Yet, when she looked at him, there was something in her expression. "Marshall," she said, and even her voice was different, pitched lower, accent more Eastern. "I'm Ellen Morrison, Judge Blackwood's new clerk." Jake stared, his mind racing. "Miss Morrison."
"Yes." She held his gaze steadily. "I arrived from Philadelphia last week. The judge can vouch for my credentials."
"Indeed," Blackwood said from behind Jake. "Impeccable references. Graduated from the Women's College of Philadelphia. Quite accomplished." Jake looked between them, understanding dawning. The judge had arranged this somehow, some way. He'd brought Rose back with a new identity, a new life, but why the disguise? Why the elaborate charade? "I'll need your statement." Jake managed. "Of course." She sat at the desk, primly arranging her skirts. "Mr. Thornton entered while I was working. He demanded money, saying Baron Hollister had sent him to collect a debt. When I refused, he became violent. I was forced to defend myself."
"With a derringer?" "A woman traveling alone learns to take precautions."
Her eyes met his again, and for just a moment, he saw Rose looking back at him. Then it was gone, and Ellen Morrison sat before him again. Jake took her statement. Every word, torture, this close. He could smell her perfume, different from before, but underneath it, essentially her. His hands shook as he wrote. "That should be sufficient," he said finally, "though I may have questions later." "I'm not going anywhere, Marshall." The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Outside, Jake confronted Judge Blackwood. "What game are you playing?" "No game." The judge lit his pipe calmly. "I needed a clerk. Miss Morrison needed employment. Simple as that." She's Ellen Morrison, from Philadelphia, with all the proper documentation to prove it." Blackwood's eyes were serious. "Rose McBride left on the stage 3 weeks ago. Several people saw her go. She's gone. Marshall. But Ellen Morrison, she's here legally, with no warrants, no past, no complications. A fresh start, you might say." Jake's throat was tight. "Why?" "Because sometimes the law needs to bend to serve justice, and because that young woman loves you enough to transform herself completely for a chance at a life here." The judge puffed his pipe. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Jake looked back at the inn, where Ellen Morrison Rose was visible through the window, calmly working at her desk despite having just shot a man. "Hollister will figure it out." "Perhaps, but proving it is another matter. And Miss Morrison has some rather powerful friends now. It seems she saved certain documents that several territorial officials found very interesting. Baron Hollister has bigger problems than one transformed woman." That evening, Jake found himself standing outside the inn again. He'd changed his shirt, shaved, tried to make himself presentable. His hand trembled as he knocked on the office door. "Come in." She was alone, working by lamplight. When she looked up, the careful mask slipped for just a moment. "Marshall, how can I help you?" Jake closed the door, leaned against it. "We need to talk. About my statement, I thought About why you came back. She set down her pen carefully. I don't know what you mean. I've never been here before. Rose. Ellen. Her voice was firm. My name is Ellen Morrison. Jake crossed to the desk in 2 strides, pulled her to her feet. This close. He could see the subtle changes, the way she'd altered her features with careful makeup, the different way she carried herself. But her eyes were the same when she looked at him. Why? He asked roughly. Her composure cracked. Because I couldn't stay away. Because 3 weeks of freedom felt like 3 years in prison. Because you what? Because I love you, you impossible man! The words tumbled out, half sob, half laugh. I tried to do the noble thing, tried to disappear, but I couldn't. So I wrote to Judge Blackwood, and he helped me become someone else. Someone who could stay. Jake cupped her face in his hands. You changed everything for me. Not everything. She smiled through tears. I'm still the same stubborn, troublesome woman who disrupts your peaceful town, just with different papers. He kissed her then, and it was like coming home after a long journey. She melted against him, and for a moment, there was no Ellen Morrison, no Rose McBride, just 2 people who'd found each other against all odds. When they broke apart, she touched his badge. This still matters to you. Yes, he admitted, but not more than you. You don't have to choose anymore. Ellen Morrison is a respectable woman with no past to haunt her. We can have a chance. Can you live as someone else forever? Watch me. Her chin lifted in that familiar, defiant way. I've been reborn before. This time, I get to choose who I become. Over the following days, Jake watched her transformation with wonder. Ellen Morrison was everything Rose McBride couldn't be. Educated, refined, with a mysterious but respectable past. She attended church, joined the ladies' auxiliary, and somehow made even the most suspicious townspeople accept her. Even Murphy, who'd been loudest in condemning Rose, found himself charmed by the efficient Miss Morrison who helped him with his accounts. That new clerk's a wonder, he told Jake one afternoon. Nothing like that other woman. You can tell breeding, martial, it shows. Jake bit his tongue and nodded, marveling at the irony. The real test came 2 weeks later when Hollister himself appeared in town. Jake tensed as the Baron entered the inn where Ellen was working, but she never faltered. She served him tea with perfect composure, discussed legal matters with intelligence, and gave no sign of recognition. Hollister studied her throughout, suspicion clear in his pale eyes. Have we met before? Miss Morrison. I don't believe so. Mr. Hollister. I've only recently arrived from Philadelphia. Her smile was polite, distant. Perhaps I remind you of someone. Perhaps, but he had no proof. And the documents in her possession, documents she'd made clear were in safe hands, kept him from pushing too hard. That evening, Jake found her shaking in the office. You did perfect, he said, holding her. I was terrified every second. She buried her face in his chest. What if he... He didn't. He can't. You're safe. She pulled back to look at him. Am I or we? Instead of answering with words, Jake did something he'd been planning for days. He dropped to one knee, pulled out a simple gold ring. Marry me, he said. I know it's complicated. I know there are risks, but... Yes. She dropped to her knees too, kissing him fiercely. Yes, yes, yes. You didn't let me finish my speech. Did it end with you asking me to marry you? Yes. Then I've heard enough. She held out her hand, watched him slip the ring on. Ellen Morrison is going to make a wonderful marshal's wife. What about Rose McBride? She was quiet for a moment. She got her fresh start. She became someone who could love and be loved without shame. I'd say she did pretty well. They were married a month later, Judge Blackwood officiating, the whole town turning out to wish them well. If anyone noticed that the marshal's new bride had eyes that seemed familiar, they kept it to themselves. The town had learned something about the nature of justice and mercy, about second chances and the courage to change. As they stood together, Jake in his best suit with his badge polished bright, Ellen in a white dress that transformed her into something ethereal. The past seemed to fade away. What mattered was the present and the future they'd build together. "I love you," Jake whispered as they kissed to seal their union. "Which me?" she whispered back, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "All of you. Every version, every name, every face." "Good answer, Marshal." That night, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Ellen traced the scar on his shoulder from an old bullet wound. "No more secrets between us," she said. "No more running." "No more," he agreed. "Just us, building something real." "Ellen and Jake Carver," she mused. "Respectable citizens of Dry Creek, with a very interesting story that no one will ever know." "Oh, I don't know." She smiled in the darkness. "Maybe someday, when we're old and gray, we'll tell our grandchildren about the marshal who gave up everything for love, and the woman who became someone else to love him back. You think we'll have grandchildren?" "I hope so." She kissed him softly. "I hope we have everything. Jake, we've earned it." Outside their window, Dry Creek slept peacefully. Baron Hollister's power had been broken by those mysterious documents, his empire crumbling as investigations began. The town had found its backbone, and justice, real justice, had taken root. And in their bed, the marshal and his wife held each other close, two souls who'd fought through deception and danger to find truth in each other's arms. The badge still mattered, but love mattered more. And sometimes, in the wild frontier where anything could happen, that was enough to build a life on. Sometimes, the greatest courage was in choosing happiness over honor. And sometimes, the most honest thing in the world was a necessary lie told in service of love. The autumn of 1878 brought changes to Dry Creek that went deeper than the turning leaves. Jake stood on the ridge overlooking the town, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Below, he could see their small house on Elm Street, smoke rising from the chimney where Ellen would be preparing supper. 6 months of marriage had brought a contentment he'd never imagined possible, but it had also brought challenges. The badge on his chest felt heavier each day, weighted with compromises and contradictions. "Thought I'd find you here," a voice said behind him. Jake turned to find Sam Chen approaching, his face grave. "Sam, something wrong?" "Got word from Silver City. Federal marshals are coming. They're investigating Hollister's operation, and they want to talk to everyone involved in bringing him down." Jake's blood chilled. Federal investigation meant scrutiny, questions, documents checked and double-checked. "When?" "Week, maybe 2. Sam studied him. "Jake, if there's anything that might not stand up to that kind of looking." "I know." Jake stared at the horizon. "I know." That evening, he found Ellen in the kitchen, humming as she worked. She'd settled into domestic life with the same determination she'd brought to her transformation. Their home was simple but warm, filled with small touches that made it theirs. "You're late," she said, turning to kiss him. Then she saw his face. "What's wrong?" He told her about the federal marshals, watched the color drain from her face, saw her hands tremble before she clasped them together. "I see," she said quietly. "Ellen, we knew this might happen." She moved to the window, gazed out at the town. "We knew the lie couldn't last forever. Maybe they won't dig that deep. Maybe isn't enough." She turned back to him. "Not anymore." "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Jake, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Jake felt the world shift, everything suddenly more precious and more precarious. A baby. Their baby. "How long have you known?" "A few weeks."
I wanted to be sure before. She touched her still flat stomach. I won't bring a child into a lie that could explode at any moment. I won't have our son or daughter grow up with that shadow. Jake pulled her into his arms, felt her tears against his shirt. His mind raced through options, possibilities, each more desperate than the last. We could run, he said. Tonight, go somewhere new, start over. With what and as who? She pulled back. Running means looking over our shoulders forever. It means teaching our child to lie from the moment they can speak. Then what? You know what? He did know. Had known from the moment Sam mentioned federal marshals. The badge that had defined him for so long would have to go. The life they'd built on half-truths would have to end. I'll resign, he said. Tomorrow, before they get here. Jake, no, your badge, your duty, aren't worth more than you. Then our family. He cupped her face. I told you once I'd choose you over the badge. I meant it. But what will you do? Who will you be without it? Your husband, our child's father. That's enough. She searched his eyes. Is it really? It has to be. The next morning, Jake walked into Judge Blackwood's temporary office. The judge looked up from his papers, saw Jake's expression, and sighed. So it's come to this. You heard about the investigation? I hear everything. Blackwood leaned back. I assume you're here to resign. Jake unpinned the badge from his chest, set it on the desk. The metal caught the morning light. 5 years of his life reflected in its surface. I can't serve the law when I'm living a lie, he said simply. Ah, but which law? Blackwood picked up the badge, turned it over in his fingers. The law of men, written in books or the higher law, the one that says love and mercy matter more than rules. Pretty philosophy won't hold up in federal court. No, I suppose not. The judge was quiet for a moment. What will you do? Don't know yet. Find work. Provide for my family. Family. Blackwood's eyes sharpened. Ah, I see. Congratulations. Thank you. Jake. The judge stood, came around the desk. Taking off the badge doesn't make you less of a man. Sometimes it takes more courage to walk away than to stand and fight. Doesn't feel that way. It never does. Blackwood handed him an envelope. Your final pay, plus a bonus. Call it a wedding gift. Delayed. Jake took it, felt its weight. Judge. Go home to your wife. Son. The town will survive. You've taught us to stand up for ourselves. Maybe that's the most important law you ever enforced. The walk home felt both endless and too short. Jake touched his chest where the badge had rested, feeling naked without it. People called out greetings, but he barely heard them. Ellen was waiting on the porch, her face a mixture of pride and sorrow. It's done. It's done. She took his hand, led him inside. On the kitchen table sat a telegram. This came while you were gone, she said. Jake read it, frowned. It was from a law firm in Denver. McKenna and Associates, attorneys at law, seeking experienced lawman for head of security position, generous salary, housing provided, utmost discretion assured. I don't understand, Jake said. Ellen smiled sadly. Judge Blackwood has friends everywhere. He's offering us a way out, a fresh start where no one knows either of us. Denver, Jake set down the telegram. That's a long way from here. Yes. They stood in their kitchen, the home they'd made together, and felt the weight of the choice. Stay and risk exposure, or leave everything behind for safety. What do you want? Jake asked. I want our child to grow up without fear. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. She paused. I want to be myself again. Not Rose, not Ellen, just me. Who is that? She considered. I don't know anymore. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we both need to find out who we are without the lies.
That evening, they walked through town together. Without the badge, Jake felt strangely lighter, as if a burden he hadn't fully recognized had been lifted. People nodded respectfully, but there was distance now. He was no longer their protector, just another citizen. They stopped at the cemetery, stood before Sarah's grave.
"I'm sorry,"
Jake said quietly.
"I'm leaving again. But this time?"
He looked at Ellen, her hand resting protectively over their unborn child.
"This time I'm choosing life."
Ellen squeezed his hand but said nothing. Understanding this was his goodbye to more than just his late wife. As they walked back, they passed the marshal's office. Already there was talk of who would replace him. The badge would find a new chest to rest on. The law would continue.
"Any regrets?"
Ellen asked. Jake thought about it. 5 years of wearing the badge, of standing between law and lawlessness. The fights, the long nights, the moments of triumph and defeat, all of it leading to this woman beside him, this life growing within her, this chance at something new. "No," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. No regrets. That night, they made love with a tenderness born of endings and beginnings. In the darkness, Ellen traced patterns on his chest where the badge used to rest.
"Tell me about Denver,"
she whispered. "Big city, growing fast. They say the mountains are beautiful. We could be anyone there." "Who do you want to be?"
"Happy," she said simply. "I want to be happy. And honest. Really honest. For the first time in so long."
"What's your real name?" Jake asked, realizing he'd never thought to ask before. She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, Margaret Rose Sullivan. My father called me Maggie." "Maggie." He tested the name, liked how it felt.
"Hello, Maggie."
"Hello, Jake."
She kissed him. "Nice to finally meet you without masks."
They started packing the next morning. Word spread quickly. The marshal had resigned, was leaving town. Some were angry, feeling betrayed. Others understood, especially those who'd stood with him against Hollister that night in the rain. Sam Chen helped them load their wagon.
"Going to miss you,"
he said simply. "Both of you."
Mrs.
Hutchins brought food for the journey, pressed Ellen's hands.
"You take care of that man," she said. "He's one of the good ones."
Even Murphy showed up, awkward but sincere. "Town won't be the same," he admitted. "But I suppose folks gotta do what's best for their families." Judge Blackwood arrived as they were finishing. He handed Jake another envelope.
"Letter of introduction to McKenna. He's expecting you."
The judge looked at Ellen Maggie and smiled. "Both of you.
He understands the need for discretion regarding past events."
"Judge," Maggie said,
"why did you help me really?"
"Because I believe in justice, my dear, and sometimes justice means giving people the chance to become who they're meant to be." He touched his hat. "Be well, both of you, all three of you." As their wagon rolled out of Dry Creek, Jake looked back one last time. The town looked smaller somehow, less significant than it had when he'd worn the badge. Just another frontier settlement trying to find its way.
"Sorry?"
Maggie asked, watching him. "No." He put his arm around her, drew her close.
"Just remembering."
"What?"
"The man I used to be."
"The one who thought the badge was everything." "He was a good man. He was incomplete." Jake kissed her temple. Took a woman with 3 names to show him what he was missing.
"Only 3,
she laughed.
"Wait until we get to Denver.
I might surprise you."
"You already have, every day."
They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the mountains growing larger on the horizon.
"Finally,"
Maggie spoke again.
"Jake, what if the baby asks about this someday, about why we left, why we changed everything?"
"We'll tell them the truth, that sometimes loving someone means choosing them over everything else. That courage isn't always about standing and fighting. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. And if they ask about the badge, Jake touched his chest reflexively, then dropped his hand. I'll tell them it was just metal. What mattered was what it stood for, protecting people, doing right. And in the end, I found a better way to do that. By giving it up. By choosing what mattered more. As the sun climbed higher, they left Dry Creek behind, along with Marshal Jake Carver and all of Ellen Morrison's carefully constructed lies. In their place rode Jake and Maggie Carver, expectant parents, heading toward new mountains and new possibilities. The badge was gone, but the man remained, changed, perhaps softer in some ways, stronger in others. No longer defined by duty to an abstract ideal, but by love for the very real woman beside him and the child they'd made together. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined when he'd first pinned on the star. But as Maggie began humming, the same tune that had captivated him in the Riverside Inn, Jake realized it was better. Sometimes a man had to lose himself to find himself. And sometimes, the greatest act of justice was choosing mercy. The greatest courage was admitting vulnerability. And the greatest honor was in loving someone more than any badge or title or reputation. The mountains waited, full of promise. And Jake Carver, former marshal, current husband, future father, rode toward them with his whole heart, finally understanding that the only law that truly mattered was the one written there. The journey to Denver took 8 days through country that shifted from desert to mountain meadows. They camped under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. And Jake discovered that freedom had a taste. It was coffee brewed over an open fire, while Maggie laughed at his attempts to cook beans without burning them. On the 5th night, camped beside a clear mountain stream, she felt the baby move for the first time. "Jake!" She grabbed his hand, pressed it to her belly. "Feel!" He waited, barely breathing. And then, there, a flutter, like a bird's wing against his palm. His child. Their child. "Hello, little one," he whispered. Maggie's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Do you think we're doing right taking this baby away from everything, starting over with nothing?" "We're not starting with nothing." Jake pulled her close. "We have each other. That's more than most folks get. But your work, your purpose, will be different, not gone." He'd been thinking about this as they traveled, watching the world open up beyond Dry Creek's narrow boundaries. Maybe I was meant to protect people in other ways, without a badge telling me who deserves it and who doesn't. Denver sprawled before them like a promise, all brick and ambition climbing toward the mountains. The city hummed with energy, construction everywhere, people of all sorts rushing about their business. After Dry Creek's dusty simplicity, it was overwhelming. The address Judge Blackwood had given them led to a modest but clean boarding house on the respectable side of town. The landlady, Mrs. O'Brien, took one look at Maggie's condition and immediately began fussing. "Saints preserve us, traveling in your state. Come in, come in. I've had a room ready since Mr. McKenna sent word." Their room was small but comfortable, with a view of the mountains. As Jake set down their bags, he felt the weight of the moment. This was it, their new life. "Scared?" Maggie asked, reading his face as always. "Terrified," he admitted. "Good, me too," she smiled. "But we're terrified together." The next morning, Jake presented himself at McKenna and Associates. The office occupied the entire 3rd floor of a modern building, all polished wood and glass. Patrick McKenna himself greeted Jake, a barrel-chested man with shrewd eyes and scarred knuckles that suggested he hadn't always practiced law from behind a desk. "Judge Blackwood speaks highly of you," McKenna said, pouring whiskey despite the early hour. "Says you're a man who understands that sometimes the law and justice ain't the same thing." "I've learned that recently." "Good, because what I need isn't another gun hand or badge polisher." McKenna leaned forward. "My clients are mostly folks who've made good in the mines or cattle business. New money. The old Denver society looks down on them. And sometimes that contempt takes aggressive forms. I need someone who can protect them without starting wars. Keeping the peace without a badge.
Exactly. McKenna smiled. The pay's good. $150 a month plus bonuses. Hours are reasonable, and I don't ask questions about a man's past, long as he does right by me. Jake thought of Maggie, of their child, of the chance to build something clean and new. When do I start? Tomorrow. If that suits, there's a welcome party tonight for Ezra Hoffman. Made his fortune in silver, trying to buy his way into society. Already received some threats. Nothing serious, probably, but I'd like eyes on the situation. That evening, Jake found himself in clothes finer than he'd ever owned, standing in the corner of a ballroom that would have swallowed Dry Creek's entire main street. He watched wealthy men and women dance, noted exits and potential troubles, felt strangely comfortable in this new role. No badge meant no obligation to arrest anyone for petty crimes. No duty to enforce laws he didn't believe in. Just the simple task of keeping good people safe from those who'd harm them. He was so focused on a suspicious waiter that he almost missed her entrance. Maggie swept into the ballroom on Mrs. O'Brien's arm, wearing a borrowed dress of deep green that brought out the fire in her hair. She'd been invited as companion to the landlady, who turned out to be Hoffman's cousin, but Jake saw heads turn as she passed, saw men straighten and women whisper. Even pregnant, even tired from their journey, she was magnificent. That your wife, McKenna, appeared at his elbow. Judge Blackwood mentioned her, said she had a story worth hearing. Everyone has a story. True enough. McKenna watched as Maggie charmed a group of society matrons. She fits in well. Natural grace, that's rare. Jake felt pride and worry in equal measure. Maggie was indeed fitting in, perhaps too well. What if this new life swallowed who she really was, just as Rose McBride and Ellen Morrison had? The evening passed without incident. The suspicious waiter turned out to be sneaking food to his hungry children, and Jake collected Maggie as the party wound down. "Enjoy yourself," he asked as they walked home through gaslit streets. "More than I expected." She leaned on his arm. "Those women, Jake, they accepted me, didn't ask about my past, just welcomed me. Do you know how long it's been since I felt that? I'm glad." She stopped walking, looked up at him, but nothing. "I want you happy." "You're worried I'll lose myself again, become another character." He couldn't deny it. "Maybe a little." "Oh, Jake." She reached up, touched his cheek. "Don't you see for the first time, I don't have to be anyone but myself. Margaret Carver, wife and soon-to-be mother. That's all. That's everything." They settled into a rhythm over the following weeks. Jake worked for McKenna, learning the subtle art of protection without authority. He discovered he was good at it, reading situations, diffusing tensions, being the quiet strength that let others feel safe. Maggie made their small room a home and found friendship among the other boarding house women. She helped Mrs. O'Brien with correspondence, her education finally serving honest purpose. Her belly grew rounder, and Jake often caught her humming to the baby. One evening, a month into their new life, Jake came home to find her crying over a letter. "What's wrong?" He was beside her instantly. "The baby." No. She wiped her eyes, handed him the letter. "It's from Judge Blackwood." Jake read quickly. Hollister was dead, killed in a federal prison while awaiting trial. His empire had crumbled completely. Dry Creek had elected Sam Chen as their new marshal. The past, it seemed, was truly buried. "Why tears, then?" he asked gently. "Relief, sorrow, everything." She took a shaky breath. "It's really over. Jake, all of it. The running, the fear, the lies. We're free." "We've been free since we left." "No, we've been hiding. There's a difference." She stood, moved to the window. "But now, Now we can truly start over. No shadows following us." That night, they made love with an abandon they hadn't felt before, the last walls between them crumbling with Hollister's death. After, as they lay entwined, Maggie traced circles on Jake's chest. "I want to write to my sister," she said suddenly. Jake tensed. She'd mentioned a sister once, back in Dry Creek, but never elaborated. "Where is she?" "Boston. Married well. Thinks I'm dead." Maggie's voice was steady, but he felt her tremble. "I let her think that because I was ashamed. But now I have you, our baby, this life. I want her to know I'm alive, that I'm happy." "Then write to her." "What if she doesn't want to hear from me? What if she's ashamed?" "Then that's her loss." Jake kissed her forehead. "But you won't know unless you try." The letter took 3 days to write. Jake found her surrounded by crumpled attempts, ink staining her fingers. "How do you explain years of silence?" she asked desperately. "How do you say, I became someone else, then someone else again, and now I'm finally me?" "You tell the truth, as much or as little as feels right." Finally, she sealed an envelope, addressed it with shaking hands. They posted it together, and Jake held her as she cried on the walk home. 2 weeks later, working security at another society function, Jake noticed Maggie deep in conversation with a well-dressed woman who looked strangely familiar. As he moved closer, he heard Maggie laugh, really laugh, free and unguarded. The woman turned, and Jake saw Maggie's eyes in another face, saw the same stubborn chin, the same graceful hands. "Jake," Maggie called him over, face glowing. "Come meet my sister Catherine." Catherine studied him with sharp intelligence. "So you're the man who saved my sister?" "She saved herself, ma'am. I just held the door open." Catherine's smile was approving. "I think I'm going to like you, Mr. Carver." Later, the sisters sat together, heads bent close, years of separation dissolving in shared whispers and occasional tears. Jake watched from across the room, marveling at the twists that had brought them here. "Your wife's sister," McKenna joined him. "From Boston." "Yes." "Rich husband, railroad money." McKenna grinned. "Seems you married well." Carver: "I married the best woman I've ever known. The rest doesn't matter." "Spoken like a man who knows what's important." McKenna clapped his shoulder. "Keep that wisdom. It'll serve you well." As autumn deepened into winter, their life in Denver took solid shape. Jake earned respect in his new profession, his reputation as a man of integrity spreading. Maggie's circle of friends grew, and with her sister's regular letters, she bloomed like a desert flower finally finding water. The baby grew stronger, kicks visible through Maggie's dresses. They spent evenings planning, choosing names, imagining the life they'd build for their child. "No lies," Maggie said one night. "We tell them the truth from the start, that people can change, can choose to be better. The whole truth. Enough of it. That their father was a lawman who chose love over law. That their mother reinvented herself for the chance at honest happiness." She smiled. "It's a good story, really, better than fairy tales." Speaking of stories, Jake pulled out a package. "This came for you today." Inside was a book, Frontier Tales by E. Morrison. Maggie gasped, opened it to find her own stories, written during quiet moments in Dry Creek, now bound and published. A note from Judge Blackwood was tucked inside. "My dear, your writings were too good to waste. A publisher friend owed me a favor. Consider it a baby gift. Perhaps young Carver will enjoy their mother's tales of the wild frontier." Maggie clutched the book, tears flowing. "He published my stories." "You're an author now." Jake grinned. "Should I call you E. Morrison?" "No." She shook her head firmly. "The next book will be by Margaret Carver, my real name on my real work." That night,
as snow began to fall outside their window. Jake held his wife and felt their child move between them. No badge on his chest, but purpose in his heart. No false names between them. Just truth and love, and the promise of tomorrow. "Do you miss it?" Maggie asked sleepily. "The badge, the authority?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I look at what I have instead. And the trade seems more than fair. Even though you gave up everything. I gave up medal and reputation. I kept everything that mattered." He kissed her gently. "And gained more than I ever dreamed." As sleep took them, the snow continued falling, blanketing Denver in white. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight, marking another day survived, another day closer to their child's arrival. The badge was gone, but Jake Carver had found something better, a life built on truth, a love earned through sacrifice, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing a man could do was choose happiness over honor. And in her sleep, Maggie smiled, one hand on her belly, the other holding tight to her husband, finally home in her own skin, finally free to be exactly who she was meant to be. The first snow of winter came early that year, December 1878, blanketing Denver in pristine white. Jake stood at the window of their new home, a small but proper house McKenna had helped them rent on Pearl Street, watching Maggie waddle through their tiny garden, her belly now round as a full moon. "You shouldn't be out in the cold," he called. She turned. Snowflakes caught in her dark hair, cheeks rosy. "The baby likes the snow. Been dancing all morning." He joined her outside, wrapped his coat around them both. "2 more weeks, Doc Williams says. Or tomorrow, or next month." She leaned into him. "Babies come when they're ready, not when doctors predict." That evening, they sat by the fire. Jake reading aloud from Maggie's published book while she knitted tiny garments. The story was one she'd written about a woman finding courage in the frontier, and Jake heard echoes of their own journey in every line. "You should write more," he said. "These are good, Maggie, really good. After the baby, when there's time." She smiled. "Though Catherine says I should write about my experiences, memoirs of a reformed woman, or some such." "Would you? Maybe, someday, when I'm old and the scandal won't matter." She set down her knitting. "Jake, I've been thinking about Dry Creek." He tensed. They rarely spoke of their former home. "Not about going back," she continued quickly, "but about the people there. Sam, Mrs., Hutchins, even Murphy. They stood up for us when it mattered. I'd like to write to them, let them know we're well." "Might not be safe." "Hollister's dead. The federal investigation is over, and—" She took his hand. "I'm tired of cutting ties with everyone who's shown us kindness. Our child deserves to know there are good people in the world, even in places we had to leave behind." Jake considered. The cautious part of him, the part that had worn a badge for 5 years, said no, but the husband, the soon-to-be father, understood her need for connection. "Write the letters," he said. "We'll post them together." 3 days later, Maggie's water broke while she was making breakfast. Jake, who'd faced down gunmen without flinching, found himself paralyzed with panic until she calmly talked him through hitching the horse and getting her to the doctor. Labor lasted 14 hours. Jake paced the waiting room like a caged wolf while Catherine, who'd arrived on the morning train from Boston, sat with serene patience. "First babies take their time," she said. "Margaret was always stubborn. Her child will be the same. What if something goes wrong? What if—" "Jacob Carver." Catherine's voice was sharp. "My sister survived things that would break most women. She'll survive this too." Near dawn on December 18th, a baby's cry pierced the quiet. Doc Williams emerged, exhausted but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Carver, you have a daughter." "A daughter?" Jake's knees nearly buckled. Is she—" "Both perfect. You can go in now." Jake found Maggie propped against pillows, hair damp with sweat, face radiant with exhaustion and joy. In her arms lay the smallest human he'd ever seen, wrapped in the blanket Maggie had knitted. "Meet your daughter," Maggie whispered. Jake approached slowly, afraid he might break something with his rough hands. The baby was red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and Maggie's stubborn chin. "Hello, little one," he said, voice thick. "Sarah," Maggie said. "I'd like to call her Sarah, if that's all right. After my first wife." Jake's eyes filled. She'd have been honored. "Sarah Catherine Carver." Maggie shifted the bundle. "Want to hold her?" Jake's hands shook as he took his daughter. She weighed nothing and everything. Hope and responsibility and love all wrapped in a yellow blanket. Sarah opened her eyes, gray like his, and stared at him with solemn intensity. "Hello, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm your papa. I promise I'll keep you safe. I promise I'll teach you to be strong and kind and brave like your mama. I promise." "Jake," Maggie touched his arm. "Just love her. The rest will follow." The first weeks passed in a blur of feedings and diapers and precious sleep. Jake discovered that a crying baby at 3 a.m. was more terrifying than any outlaw he'd faced. But when Sarah gripped his finger with her tiny fist, when she settled against his chest and slept trustingly, he understood what true courage meant. McKenna gave him time off, and Jake spent it learning the rhythms of new fatherhood. He walked Sarah around the house when she was fussy, singing half-remembered lullabies in his rusty voice. He watched Maggie nurse their daughter, marveling at the fierce tenderness in her eyes. "You're good at this," he told her one evening. "I'm terrified every moment," she confessed. "What if I do something wrong? What if I'm not enough?" "You're everything she needs, everything we both need." Letters arrived from Dry Creek, Sam Chen sending congratulations and a small wooden toy he'd carved, Mrs. Hutchins offering advice and recipes for colic, even Murphy grudgingly wishing them well. The past, it seemed, could offer blessings as well as burdens. On Christmas Eve, they hosted a small gathering. Catherine and her husband, McKenna and his wife, Mrs. O'Brien, Doc Williams, their little house filled with warmth and laughter. Sarah passed from arm to arm like a precious gift. "To new beginnings," McKenna toasted, "and to the courage to chase them." As their guests departed, snow began falling again. Jake and Maggie sat by the dying fire, Sarah sleeping in her cradle beside them. "A year ago, I was alone in Dry Creek, wearing a badge and thinking I knew everything about justice." Jake mused. "A year ago, I was on a stage running from my past, certain I'd never be anything but what men had made me," Maggie added. "Now look at us, parents, citizens, building something real." "Do you ever regret it, giving up the badge?" Jake looked at his wife, his daughter, the life they'd built from ashes and hope. "The badge was just metal. This is gold." Spring came early in 1879, and with it, changes. Jake's reputation in Denver grew, and McKenna made him a partner in the security business. They moved to a larger house with a proper nursery and a garden where Maggie could grow flowers. Sarah grew too, laughing and babbling, crawling with determined purpose. She had Jake's eyes, but Maggie's spirit, curious about everything, afraid of nothing. One evening, Jake came home to find Maggie at her writing desk, Sarah playing at her feet. "A new story?" he asked. "Something like that." She showed him the pages. "It's about us, our story, changed enough to be fiction, but true in all the ways that matter." Jake read, seeing their journey transformed into art. The lawman who chose love, the woman who chose rebirth, the town that learned to stand against tyranny. "It's beautiful," he said. "Will you publish it?" "Under my own name, Margaret Carver," she smiled. "No more hiding." That summer brought unexpected visitors. Judge Blackwood arrived on the afternoon stage,
older but still sharp-eyed, accompanied by a younger man Jake didn't recognize. "This is Thomas Brennan," the judge explained over dinner. "The new marshal of Dry Creek. He wanted to meet the man whose legacy he inherited." Brennan was earnest and eager, full of questions about Jake's time wearing the badge. "The town folks still talk about you," he said. "How you stood up to Hollister. How you protected Mrs. Carver. You're something of a legend." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what seemed right at the time." "That's what makes it legendary," Blackwood observed. "Most men would have done what was easy." After dinner, Jake walked with the judge in the garden while Maggie entertained young Brennan with stories. "You seem content," Blackwood said. "I am. No regrets about the badge?" "None." Jake watched through the window as Sarah totted to her mother, laughing. "I found something better than law and order. I found grace." "Grace?" Blackwood repeated. "Yes, I suppose that's what we're all looking for, isn't it? The chance to be more than our worst moments? You gave us that chance. I'll never forget it. You gave it to yourselves. I just opened a door." The judge smiled. "Keep opening doors, Jake, for others who need that grace." As autumn arrived, bringing golden aspens and crisp air, the Carvers settled fully into their Denver life. Jake's business thrived, protecting those who needed it without the constraints of badges and warrants. Maggie's writing flourished, her stories finding eager readers hungry for tales of frontier courage. And Sarah grew, toddling through their house on uncertain legs, bringing joy with every giggle and discovery. One night, as they prepared for bed, Maggie said, "I'm pregnant again." Jake froze, shirt half buttoned. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." She smiled at his expression. "Hoping for a boy this time." "Hoping for healthy, happy, here with us." He pulled her close. "Everything else is gravy." They stood together in their bedroom, moonlight streaming through the window, their daughter sleeping peacefully down the hall, another child growing between them. The badge Jake had once worn with such pride lay forgotten in some drawer in Dry Creek. The identities Maggie had worn like armor were shed completely. In their place stood truth, complicated, messy, beautiful truth. They were Jake and Margaret Carver, parents and partners, building a life on the foundation of hard-won wisdom. "Thank you," Maggie whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me, the real me. For giving up everything to help me become her." "You already were her. You just needed room to breathe." "And you gave up your badge to give me that room." "Best trade I ever made." As they lay down together, Sarah cried out in her sleep. Jake rose to check on her, found her clutching the wooden toy Sam Chen had sent. He adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead, marveled again at this life they'd created. When he returned to bed, Maggie was writing in her journal by candlelight. "What are you writing?" "Notes for Sarah, for both children, about who we were, who we became, so they'll understand that people can change, can choose love over fear, hope over duty." "Will you tell them everything?" "When they're old enough." "Yes." She set down her pen. "They deserve to know their parents are human, that we made mistakes and hard choices and found each other anyway. They might judge us. They might, but they might also understand that redemption is possible. That's a lesson worth learning." Jake blew out the candle, pulled her close in the darkness. Outside, Denver slept peacefully, unaware of the former marshal and the woman of many names who'd found their truth in each other. "I love you, Margaret Rose Sullivan Carver," he whispered, using all her names like a prayer. "And I love you, Jacob Carver, badge or no badge, forever." As sleep claimed them, Jake thought about the strange paths that had led them here, a theft in a general store, a woman's desperate hunger, a marshal's moment of conscience, such small things to build a life on. Yet here they were, whole, happy, home.
The badge he'd surrendered had once defined him. Now, holding his wife while their daughter slept and another child grew, Jake understood that sometimes a man had to lose himself completely to find who he was meant to be. And sometimes, the greatest justice was mercy, the greatest law was love, and the greatest courage was choosing happiness in a hard world. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs, but in a house on Pearl Street, the Carver family slept peacefully, proof that even in the wildest frontier, love could take root and bloom. Their story would continue, through children and challenges, through joy and sorrow. But this moment, this night, this choice to build rather than destroy, to love rather than judge, this was their true beginning. And it was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey through the Wild West, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, redemption, and courage in the American frontier. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more tales with you soon.